What's going on, everyone? This is Pat with PokéDunkersTCG.com, and this is my story about how I got scammed for over $2,000. I will start out by saying this is an emotional and somewhat raw story for me. I am embarrassed, and I debated whether or not to even share this. I decided to go ahead and do it because there's lots of others out there who are trying to create online businesses, whether it's Pokemon or not, and they're setting up a Wix or a Shopify store, and they're not exactly sure what to look for. They may even be setting themselves up to be a victim of this. And if you're someone that works in the collector space, where hobbies are constantly shifting, price points are constantly changing, you can get duped pretty easily. So let's just start from the beginning. It's a good place to start. So, February of 2025. Now, this is where I got back into the Pokemon card collection hobby. Like so many others, this is around the time where Prismatic Evolutions came out, which was January 17th. Myself and my kids were just kind of looking for something to do to pass the winter. And while my daughter really wanted to collect all the evolutions, we just could not find Prismatic Evolutions anywhere. So I decided to try to pivot to collect something that we could do together, and we started to collect temporal forces, just simply because we could never find Prismatic. And on February 20th, I published a YouTube video titled "The Journey Starts Today," and the expectation wasn't anything crazy. This was a channel that I started to rip packs really with my kids, and just to have something fun to do with them. But it's a quick 4-minute video just around, some of the chaos that we were dealing with as new collectors in the hobby, watching people fight in stores over the availability of some of this product. And very quickly, the English product started to dry up. And while we had collection goals around master setting and PCing temporal forces, unfortunately that's not something that ended up working. So we had to pivot, and whatever we were able to find, whatever I was able to find, I ended up buying and bringing home and opening with my kids. And because we liked the pack opening so much, some of the videos my kids were watching, it was actually Deep Pocket Monster, the shorts. My kids found those on YouTube, and they were just eating them up, and they wanted to make their own videos. So I started to make pack opening videos with my kids on this channel. And even if there's videos of my kids trying to open these, although they're younger, they had shaky hands and made a lot of people dizzy, I'm sure, but we found it cute, and they really enjoyed doing it. And our primary goal was just to kind of create something fun, to do something that was innocent and pure with the hobby. They enjoyed opening packs. I enjoyed opening packs. Who doesn't enjoy opening packs? But the cost of these packs was increasing really, really fast. And I needed to find a way to negate some of the cost of the hobby, especially at the rate that myself and my kids were opening. So we started this shorts channel, and we didn't expect anything out of it. And as you can see, we didn't really get much out of it in total since we started. It's about 7.1K total views, and only about 20 subscribers. No big deal. That's not what we were after. We were just kind of looking for something to do, and it was a new hobby for myself to learn as far as video editing goes, and it allowed my kids and myself something in addition to just opening packs all in a row. It was something that was a little bit more targeted. It was a couple packs a day. We made a bunch of videos. We got some really cool pulls. Well, March timeframe comes along, and I need to start looking at what I can do to try to offset some of the cost, because the cost was increasing very quickly. The stock on Pokemon Center was pretty much gone at this point in time. Everyone was buying up everything, and I'm not someone that wanted to go into the stores and join the chaos of the scalping and flipping product. That's not something I wanted to get into. But I'd also never really purchased singles before, because our first and only goal was master setting temporal forces. I looked at eBay but I opted out of that. But we were still sitting on a good amount of cards that we had duplicates of. Um, I was using TCG Player already, along with price charting, to find out the individual value of these cards. And I started to sell on TCG Player just because it was the easiest thing. And even though there was 13 or so percent platform and listing fees, it made sense, and it was a quick way. I didn't have a following, obviously, on social media or any other platform, and so this allowed me to remain somewhat faceless in the crowd, while also trying to turn over some of the duplicates that we were sitting on, as we were, at this point in time, trying to master set multiple sets and just slowly collect based on what we could find. So this allowed me to bring some money in, reinvest it, and enjoy the hobby with my kids. Well, very quickly I found out I enjoyed this process. And in March I made a total of 48 sales, which came out to be $1,149.69 of total sales. When you look at the fees and what you're actually paid after all of that, I netted $971.82. I sold really any single that we had of value in order to pay for the act of opening packs. Very quickly, I realized that my kids, being the age that they were at, didn't necessarily appreciate, the art rares or the secret rares or anything like that. They just really enjoyed opening the packs, and they liked having something to do with Dad. So I decided to take the more valuable cards and send them in to CGC for bulk grading. Again, not looking to maximize profit or anything, which is why I didn't choose PSA. And then also, obviously, PSA was insanely backed up, and I had never graded a card before. So CGC just felt like an overall safe bet. And then simultaneously, I decided, during my first month that, hey, I'm really enjoying packaging and shipping these cards. It's become a nice little side hustle. I've been quickly, successful, despite really kind of being new to the hobby. And I set a goal for myself to rank up the store and try to reach seller level 4 by the end of the month. As I mentioned, simultaneously, I submitted multiple cards for grading, and I've got a couple of screen caps of cards that we ended up pulling and sending in. Very quickly, Temporal Forces dried up, so we started grabbing anything we could. So Paradox Rift, we were able to pull a Groudon. We got the Squirtle and the Bulbasaur from Stellar Crown, which very quickly became one of my favorite sets to open up. The Arbok and the Walking Wake from Temporal Forces were cards that we were able to collect very early on and even get doubles of. And as I mentioned, PSA was backed up for months, so CGC just kind of seemed like the only other alternative that made sense, that had decent turnaround times. And we submitted the first CGC order, and it was received by CGC on March 10th. And it was submitted under the bulk rate, which was the cheapest rate. And at the time, I didn't really know what to expect. All I knew is that PSA was taking, 3 to 4 months, and I didn't want to wait that long because I'm an impatient person. I didn't have any intention of necessarily flipping those products, but at the same time, I just thought, hey, it might be really cool if I can maximize the value of these cards, or not maximize, because if I was doing that, it would be PSA. But if I could create more value within these cards and then potentially sell them to, again, turn around, buy more product for myself and my kids to enjoy. It was around this time that I decided to send yet another CGC order, and I ended up taking it out of the personal collection that we had, and that was received by CGC on 3/18, but I submitted that under the economy, which is, their next level beyond bulk. And overall, I kept repeating this process, and the first order that I received back from CGC was actually my second submission, and that was for 9 cards total. The second order I received back was actually my third submission for 18 cards. And finally, the third order I got back was my first submission, and you can see the dates here. But in total, I submitted 52 cards in March, and the total cost for doing that was $702 because I signed up for a membership, and I was able to get my submissions discounted slightly. The total raw value of the cards that I submitted was $1,068 total when I submitted them. So fast forward a little bit to April. I am finally, or I shouldn't say finally, but very quickly, seller level 4 on TCG Player. My feedback rating was and still is 100%. I enjoyed being quick, efficient, and I was just having a really good time flipping these cards and finding a way to reinvest and do this with my kids. CGC returns were also finally coming back, and I wanted to find really a new sales avenue to, again, add more money to the hobby side. I was churning through all the Pokemon business content that I could find, and shout out to PokeNE because that channel became my most preferred source of information. And I'm pretty sure I've listened to the business playlist probably at least 2 times at this point in time. But I took a couple of nuggets from that, and I remembered a lot of things, and I decided to apply it to my business. So as I was looking for a new sales avenue outside of TCG Player, especially now that I was getting slabs back, I explored Whatnot, I looked at TikTok, but ultimately I decided to go with Drip Shop Live. Multiple reasons for this, but the TCG Player listing fees at this point were already starting to feel a little punitive, and I wanted to avoid higher fees on a secondary platform, and Drip just at the time had the lowest fees available, so I chose Drip as my secondary sales avenue. My first month on Drip, in order to even be able to live stream, I gave away a Journey Together ETB that I went out to the store and picked up, and that gave me enough followers to enable live streaming. Within that first month on Drip, I made a total of 265 individual sales, which accounted for $1,538.21 in total sales, but after fees, the net was still only $1,031.91. At this time, I had started to invest heavily in Japanese cards and boxes, specifically Battle Partners and Heatwave Arena, mainly because I struggled to find Journey Together. All the other sets had pretty much gone dry in the market, and I found very quickly that as I was streaming, most of the people just wanted the cool looking cards. They didn't necessarily care what language. Yes, the Japanese were not valued as high as English, but it gave me something to do, and it gave me an avenue to engage with a new audience. And around this time, Drip turned on this review feature, and very quickly, shout out to the 7 reviews that I have at the time of pulling the screenshot, but I was starting to develop a small following of people that would tune in regularly to the stream, and I genuinely enjoyed interacting with these people. They all added value to my stream. They all allowed for conversation to flow very easily. And, not all of them necessarily had to be buying a ton. That's not necessarily what it was about. But they made the time go by very quickly. And I wanted to continue to do better for these people, for the people that were passionate about the hobby, who were ripping packs with, a niece or a nephew, for example, or with their kids. They had a lot of similar stories to mine, and I empathize, I sympathize with that. And to me, this was just an alternative way to engage with an audience out there, potentially grow a small business model, and even have a new avenue to sell specifically the graded cards, because the graded cards, I found out pretty quickly on, were not as liquid as I initially thought. But that lesson didn't come for a little bit. So what I decided to do, going back to PokeNE, is launch a website. And the sole purpose of this website was to try to find a venue to sell my graded cards. I was trying to avoid eBay for a couple of reasons, and I'll get to that. But I had sold a couple of my slabs on Drip, but it wasn't necessarily churning in the way that I thought it would. I needed to find a way to scale online without necessarily being constantly, on camera or doing, X, Y, and Z outreach in order to get sales. I wanted to build something that I could proactively but passively build. And what I mean by that is I could schedule posts ahead of time. I could do things during the night and still engage people during the day because I have a full-time day job, and it's something that is fairly demanding. And I don't always have the capability to pour the time I would like to into the business side of it during the day. So I focused on building a website, and I did it via Wix. And I started to create, my branding, my socials, Discord, and I started to post. I started to post at least, 2 to 3 times a day. And I needed to find a way again to just proactively sell without the time requirement for streaming. Because anytime I went live on Drip, I was streaming for at a minimum 3 hours, usually 5 hours, and I was starting a little bit later in the day. So it was around a weekend, a little less than a weekend, that I received my first order. And the first order that I received was actually a Journey Together ETB that I posted intentionally as a loss leader. It was certainly under market value at this time, but I just wanted to put something on the website that I knew people were looking for at the time, and Journey Together had just been released. I also had posted, one of the first batches that I received back from CGC, and from that batch, I sold a Ninetales, a Charizard, and a Chansey card as well. So obviously, I was ecstatic. I started to use my social media marketing tools on Wix. I started to promote my products. I mentioned I set up a Discord. I did all the things, and very, very quickly, I found some early success. The total of my first order was for $516.54 on PokéDonkersTCG.com. This did wonders for what I felt like the potential of the business could be. It was reassuring. It told me I was on the right track. It told me that my price points were aligned where they should be for someone who was still actively learning as I was going. And it just gave me some reassurance that I was doing something right. And knowing full well and having at least some idea of what the resale industry looks like, the Journey Together ETB was not intentionally purchased for the sake of scalping. Actually, if I were scalping, it would have been priced a lot higher. I just wanted to make sure that I had something attractive on the website that might attract a first-time buyer. And it seems like it worked, but then additionally, some extra slabs were picked up, so we're feeling good about ourselves. So all of a sudden, we're in April, we're in month 2 of TCG Player. And as I mentioned before, still new to singles. I'm 2 months in to this. I opted out of doing the eBay thing. I was leveraging the tools to do all my pricing and everything, but I realized very quickly that TCG Player was a race to the bottom. So in April, I netted a total of 43 sales. I did $1,592.32 of total sales, which gave me a net of $1,368.86 after my platform fees. This was a net increase of $397 versus March. So month 2, I exceeded month 1 by about $400. Why? It was mainly Japanese cards and boxes. I mentioned that the English product near me had pretty much dried up. There was not much availability, and the Japanese boxes that I started to buy for my drip stream, I started to open live on stream to get people buying, talking, and just, as I was getting hits and people were seeing the hits that I was keeping for myself, people started to buy the stuff. And I started to realize that very quickly I was going to have to consume some of what I was purchasing in order to get people going. Because again, no social media following. I really didn't have much of a following in general on any platform, let alone Drip. And for the most part, I was dealing with maybe 1 or 2 consistent viewers each night that I went live. But it was mostly new people to the stream every single time I went live. And so these new people, they would come on, they would see me ripping packs. I'd be having a good time. I was getting hit after hit because, of course, these Japanese boxes, you're guaranteed at least 1 secret rare. And so as I was pulling these cards, I started to set some aside, not for flipping and selling on TCG Player, but in order to go ahead and grade. Part of the 43 total sales that I sold, I would say only about half of them were cards or singles. The other half of what I sold was Japanese boxes. And the main reason for me doing that was I was buying as much as I could afford at the time from my Japanese supplier, and then liquidating and making a very, very small profit. And by that I mean, like, sometimes I would lose $1 after shipping, and sometimes I would make like $3. So like it all netted out, and it was essentially a break even. But I would break even, then I'd go back and I'd buy more, and I'd had new product on stream, and I'd start to send, the hits that I got to CGC. It was kind of a wash and repeat. But that accounted for the net $400 increase from month one to month two in April. Now, let me establish some ground rules for those of you who have not sold on TCG Player. These seller rules are that you're paying approximately 13% of a platform fee whenever someone buys your product. So in the example that I have here, a box of Obsidian Flames, and this is directly from my seller dashboard. These are the fees. This is as transparent as I can get. I had reached seller 4. So at seller 4, that's where you're allowed to set these flexible shipping options. So on TCG Player, it's kind of a race to the bottom. So what I decided to do is to sell at market, but to have free shipping. And that generally meant that because the shipping was always flat rate anyway, it wouldn't subject me to losses on large orders. And posting these more expensive boxes meant that people were less likely to buy like 10 plus boxes at once. So I wasn't going to get absolutely pillaged by these fees, these shipping fees that I have to pay. So here's the example. A box of Ruler of the Black Flame, $84.78. Free shipping, total amount, that $84.78 for quantity 1. The fee that I was paying is that 13% fee. That's $11.35 right off the top that comes out of my pocket. And so the net amount that I get paid is $73.43. And I'm pretty much right in the middle of the country. So on average, it costs me anywhere between $4.50 to $7, depending on how far I'm shipping. And each of these boxes weighs about 0.7 pounds. So it's not too bad when all is said and done in terms of packaging all this stuff up. Then, of course, there's the cost of packing materials, the boxes that you're shipping out, all that other stuff. So you're not netting much more than what you're buying them for. And in some cases, you're actually losing money. But that's an example for a box. Anything that's less than $20 in value that is a single, you can ship in a plain white envelope. That's about $1.50 for postage. Anything that is over $20 in value, TCG strongly suggests that the seller ships with tracking so that you are protecting yourself. And just that tracking fee alone is usually at a minimum, we'll call it $5. And then anything that's over $50 in value, the tracking is mandatory. You have to pay for the tracking. So immediately you're out at least $5 anytime you do it like this. But again, you list it at market, your shipping is free, and you generally will come out ahead instead of listing it at the lowest just to try to liquidate on TCG Player. So that was the game that I was playing. So fast forward then to May of 2025, and if you're me, it's time to place my bets. I've built a website. It's a decent looking website. I've tried to do what I could on the mobile side, but for the most part, the desktop experience is decent. But as I looked at the overall potential of the business, TCG Player fees really limited the ability to grow due to just the listing 13% fees. That it was just too much out of pocket right at the beginning. The drip shop fees were more in line at 6%, and the shipping was generally at the cost of the customer, unless you're doing a giveaway. eBay fees that I mentioned before, and this is why I wanted to stay away from eBay, they were way more punitive due to the listing and the advertising fees to sell the product. So for example, on eBay, it might cost you 13% to list the product. That way you blast it out to a huge market. But the problem is everyone else is using eBay for a bunch of other things. So in order for your listing to stand out, it suggests that you pay another percentage on top of your listing amount to go towards quote unquote advertising your product or positioning your product over others. So if you have a $100 item and you're paying a 13% listing fee, that's $13 out of pocket right away. And then it will suggest anywhere from 10 to 15% generally that you pay on top of that So all of a sudden, your $100 item that you're looking for, you're down $13, and then another 10 to 15 off the top of that. So you're immediately down roughly 25% if you sell on eBay, unless you're willing to let your eBay listing sit out there and wait for someone to discover it. So eBay was just even more punitive than TCG Player, and really just wasn't an option. But unfortunately, that's what people leverage to sell graded cards. And then you look at what website fees cost, and outside of the cost of building the website, you're really only paying a 3% processing fee for the credit card. And so to me, it just felt like the right thing to do was to build PokéDonkersTCG.com and just see what it could become. So, what changed in May for me? Well, I tried to build the website's mobile functionality out so that it was just a better user experience. I got some very early feedback from some very vocal Facebook followers that said, hey, your site is impossible to navigate on the mobile side. So, worked really hard to rectify and fix that. I also started to narrow my focus to graded cards, Japanese boxes, and singles instead of just trying to do everything. I started to list a pre-order slash back order functionality where it would allow potential customers to order an item from me that I would then source through Japan. And I pretty much said, hey, if you order one of these items, it's going to take 7 to 10 business days to get to you. So if you quote unquote pre-order an item, it's going to be a little bit longer, but essentially I'll do all the work. I'll source everything from Japan, and you'll end up usually getting a better cost than ordering through TCG Player if you do it that way, because I'm able to mark things down below market cost there. And my whole goal was to focus on the customer and focus on speed and customer satisfaction first and foremost. And this was really kind of driven by my live interactions that I had on Drip, where I saw how passionate people were about just Pokemon in general, the TCG, how they spent their time, interacting with the hobby, and it just made me want to build a better website, to build a potential business that could be something that I just had a strong passion about. And it was really around this time in May, very early in May, that English is completely gone in my area. I can't find it. The best luck that I have is going to those Pokemon Center vending machines that I'm sure we've all run into at some point in time, and rolling the dice and hoping that I get lucky. But even when I was doing that, I might find a stray pack, maybe two. But there was nothing that was really worth bringing home to rip open with my kids. And the cost of the Japanese boxes was low enough where we could still enjoy ripping packs, but it didn't necessarily hit my wallet nearly as hard. And so I'd be able to take a portion of that, open it up with my kids, and then make the rest available to followers on Drip and post it on the website. But the one thing I stopped doing was ripping packs for myself on live on stream, and I instead made sure that if I was not ripping open those boxes, that I was liquidating whatever I quote unquote had left after about 2 weeks, and then reinvesting that and buying new stuff, and ultimately trying to bring my price point down on these boxes each time I made a purchase, working with my Japanese supplier. But then it happened. May 14th, 2025, 10:02 a.m. I got my first large order, bigger than my first order for about $500, 4 times bigger, $2,066.13 for a total of 13 items. And I was elated. I rushed to fill this order as fast as I possibly could. All of my bangers that I had opened with my kids, some of the first cards that I had graded that had come back, and these gem mint 10s, or these pristine 10s from CGC, sold, and I was so happy. I was like, finally, this is going to be something. And you can see here exactly what this person bought. They bought my gem mint 10 Groudon that we pulled from Paradox Rift. They bought an Evolution bundle that included Pidgeotto Pidgeot from the City in Flames. We got our Frigibacks for Rigorath, Bulbasaur, and our Squirtle from Stellar Crown, our duplicate Walking Wake that we no longer had in a binder. My first Japanese card sold, which was a Lacey, which very popular card, so I wasn't necessarily surprised. And then they threw in 3 boxes of Terrastal Fest. So, first big order, and of course, I do everything I can to get this thing out. I wanted to make sure that I was making this customer super happy. I looked at everything that they had ordered, and I didn't really think too much of it, and I shipped it out. And then about a week later, I got another order from the same customer. May 21st, 2025, 9:40 in the morning. 20 items, same person, $2,763.80. The one thing that stood out to me as a little bit odd with this order is that this person ordered my back order items. I was completely out of Terrastal Festival. I was completely out of my Glory of Team Rocket. And they took advantage of the pre-order, the back order function, where I had said, okay, this will make it to you within 7 to 14 business days. Now, because this customer is such a good customer and someone that I thought was a whale based on their previous order, I immediately shot him an email, which went unanswered. And I said, okay, we're placing your order with Japan. It'll be over. We'll get you taken care of. And I went ahead and I placed that order. But then I received an alert, and this is hours later after I talked to the supplier in Japan. And this alert said that your customer told their bank that they didn't make this payment, so it's marked as suspicious. Okay, at this point in time, I'm starting to panic a little bit. Goes on to say, usually suspicious payments become chargebacks, which means that the money will be withdrawn from your Wix payment account. Now I'm really starting to panic because I had already taken the money from that first order, that $2,000 order, and I had reinvested it into the business. And the site gave me 3 options. It said you can either stop the payment, you can investigate it further, or you can consider issuing a refund to avoid a chargeback. Well, it's at this point in time where I'm like, oh no. I remember watching a video from Pokey about chargebacks and how they're no good. So I really start to freak out at this point in time. So tell myself, calm down. Let's take a look at the options. Option number 1, stop payment. Well, I couldn't. It had already been delivered. It was signed for. I even made sure, because of watching these other videos in the industry, that, hey, you should fork over the extra $1.50 to make sure you get a signature on these. Then that way you can protect yourself further. So I did that. I thought I had protected myself. Next step, investigate. Okay, step number 1, do billing and shipping match? Well, I knew they did. I verified that when the initial order came over, because that is generally the first sign that something is wrong and something that should be validated, is especially on a large order. If the bill to and the ship to address do not match, you need to find out why that is, because it's rare, especially when delivering to a collector, that they would have something shipped to a forwarding address or a business or whatever. So check. Okay, I start to feel my first sigh of relief. Next thing you should do, try emailing the customer. Well, I sent one email before. It didn't go answered, but I wasn't really expecting an answer. There wasn't a call to action. I was just giving a notification. So I emailed the customer, and I said, hey, just so you know, your first order is flagged as suspicious. I know it already got to you, but as a heads up, I need you to respond with the following information. I need your identification to verify that you live where you've asked to have this shipped to. And I need just, show me that you're in possession of the card, take a picture, and we're good to go. I gave that about 24 hours, and there was no response. Okay, well, what's the next thing I can do? Well, I can try calling the customer. So that's exactly what I did. And I'm not going to give away the actual customer information, only because For all I know, this could have been stolen information. But I tried calling the customer at the listed phone number, and someone on the other end with a very, very thick accent answered, and I asked to speak with Darren, and they told me I had the wrong number. And so I immediately start to panic even more. So I take to Google Maps and I pull up a picture of the shipping address, and the picture that you see in front of you is the address in which the original shipment was sent to and signed for. It's an abandoned building, nobody's home, nobody's there. I was scammed out of $2,000. So where did I screw up? Well, my assumption was that since the bill to and the ship to address matched, that the order was completely fine. I did not verify the address before shipping the $2,000 worth of inventory by calling or emailing the first time. All I did was say, look at my system and the back end of my website, and it told me everything matched, so I rushed to ship it. I focused on the speed and the accuracy of my ability to process instead of engaging with the customer prior to shipping to confirm the purchase or make sure that they didn't add too many things to the cart, whatever it might be. So I ended up losing $2,000 plus the processing fees. I immediately refunded both orders, which meant that I then had to fund the Wix Payments account to refund the initial order, and then I canceled the second order for $2,700, and I flagged the user on my side and the entire account as a scammer so that it's not something that I just completely forget about in the future should they try to come back and do this a third time. So with that being said, I have been deeply humbled and embarrassed by this entire process. The only thing I could do was refund and cut my losses. There was really no other option. So May 22nd is when I issued the refund for both orders. And it left me kind of stun-locked. I didn't necessarily know what to do. And chargebacks are something that could damage my business before it even got going. Chargebacks could make it so that I can no longer process any type of payments on my website. And it would pretty much mean that my business was dead in the water before it even got going, before I even got to the point where I could see a profit. So I had no choice. I refunded it, and here I am telling my story so that no one else does what I did. Now, the salt in the wound, of course, is that I ordered what was requested from my Japanese supplier before I found out that I was part of a chargeback scam. So prior to this order, I was getting close to my break-even point for the cost of building the business. And this cost included, website, packing materials, shipping costs, and this is all post-platform fees. So this is post-trip fees, post-TCG Player fees, everything. It was starting to look up. And all of a sudden, I'm dumping $2,700 in orders to Japan. So what's the silver lining in all of this? Well, the silver lining is that I'm now in possession of quite a bit of product, enough that I'm able to do a sale on the website for Terrestrial Festival, Glory of Team Rocket, and Battle Partners. Those three are going to be priced below market, and I will continue to adjust the price to make sure they're below market. As of the go live of this video, Terrestrial Festival is $91, Glory of Team Rocket is $109, and Battle Partners is $68. All well below what you'll find out there on TCG Player. So moving forward into June 2025 and beyond, where do I go from here? Well, let's take a look at the entirety of the business. So far in 2025, from my time as a collector with my kids, all the way through starting to flip some cards and work on what I would call the business side before I even knew I was building a business, my all-in cost has been $14,551.76. My total sales after my listing fees on Drip, eBay, TCG Player, because yes, I did turn on eBay functionality to connect with my website as just a way to scale and move some product, but I'm not paying the additional advertiser fees, so it's still that 13%. My total sales net and kind of what I've grossed after paying those fees is $8,418.20. The chargeback scam set me back $2,146.58, but I am fortunate that right now my current inventory is enough to cover my loss, including the chargeback scam. I implore you all that if you're in the process of building, whether it's a Pokemon business, an online business really of any kind, that you learn from my mistakes. I know that I can come back from this and continue to reinvest in the business. I know that I'm limiting myself by not necessarily doing any face-to-face vending or even going on camera for this video. But the reason why I'm not doing those things is because I have a fairly demanding job. My job would not necessarily allow me to kind of come out and go on camera for this type of thing, at least not in a way that I'd feel comfortable doing so at this point in time, simply because I'm able to essentially work two jobs. I work this job at night, and I work my normal job during the day. They don't conflict; they're completely separate industries. But I don't want to mingle or commingle those two, I guess, personas at this time. And while I do see the importance of vending as a way to kind of take in inventory, because right now the way I'm doing it is probably the more expensive way, it's just not something that I have the time or the bandwidth to do now, just given my day-to-day demands and my desire to spend time with my family on the weekends. The next question I'm sure you have is, why aren't you exposing the scammer's information? Well, a couple of reasons. The scammer is probably not named the person that they left. The scammer is probably by a different name, and for all I know, they stole someone's actual identity and their actual credit card information. Probably not their actual email address, but maybe everything else. And this individual may have been harmed in a way that I was. Only I'm hoping that that's not the case, since I made it right and I went ahead and I refunded everything. So hopefully, if that is the case, that person's taken care of, and I've done the ethical thing, and I've protected myself and my potential business going forward. If I chose to liquidate everything that I have and stop right now, I could still come out ahead despite the scam, but I also don't necessarily want to do that because I enjoy it too much, and I think that everything I've learned over the last 3 months, I can start to share with others, and hopefully you get one or two nuggets from this whole thing that really resonates with you. If you are someone who made it this far into the video, the good news is that anything on my website at checkout, if you use the code video5, you'll get 5% off your entire order just because you stuck with it as far as you did. And the website, again, is pokedonkerstcg.com. I have slabs as well as Japanese sealed. I have more coming in. I intend to continue to reinvest. I intend to make this a profitable business. So be sure to use that promo code and really, spread the good word. And that's kind of my ask, is I'd like for this as much as possible to be not necessarily just me talking at you and you taking a couple of notes and applying it to maybe a business that you're building, but also if you're a collector out there, I hope that this resonates with you. I choose to grade with CGC because I feel like as a collector that the PSA slabs are often out of reach in terms of what I would be able to afford if I was just someone who was just trying to add to my collection, or maybe I wouldn't feel comfortable sitting on it without a way to kind of subsidize it the way that I'm doing with this business. So I feel like CGC allows me to bring down the cost for these cards and these slabs enough to the point where I'm able to make some additional income off of it, while you're able to get a chase card that you've been looking for already pre-slabbed up. And so I've created a Discord community to hopefully get to the point where I can start to pivot away from TCG Player, eBay, and really just kind of focus on the website and focus on the Discord as a way to move product and allow for people to just raise their hand and say, hey, I want that single. But also, I've set up a Facebook, an Instagram, obviously this YouTube channel, TikTok as a way to still enjoy the hobby with my kids. I expect for this to continue to be a mix of business and pleasure as far as the hobby side plus the business side. But ultimately, I would love it if you've made it this far, thank you very, very much. But if you have, comment below and help to share my story so that we might be able to help others. And join the Discord. I mean, that's a great place to interact with me as well. I'm fairly active on it even during the day. And I'd love to just kind of hear your feedback on just kind of the overall format of this video. It's obviously a long one. So again, thank you for sticking with me. But these last 3 months have been grueling, and it's been an incredible learning experience. But the one thing that I know for sure is that I don't want to stop, and I'm enjoying it still, despite the fact that there are evil scammers out there that want nothing but to torpedo the business before it even gets started. So again, thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate it. Let me know what you think below.